The film opens with the strange distorted sounds of a helicopter passing as we fade in on a tree line, the entrance to the jungle, in the heart of darkness, so to speak. The beginnings of a song titled The End by The Doors plays. This iconic opening was actually something Coppola stumbled upon during the edit. Coppola had visited the editing room on the last day of one of his editors, Barry Malcolm, before he had to leave for another project. Coppola noticed barrels of film that were the beginnings and ends of footage from the 5 cameras that photographed the napalm tree line explosion from the end of the Flight of the Valkyries battle sequence. These beginnings of the takes before the explosion happened had been discarded into the barrels, so what you're looking at is footage meant for the trash can of the camera rolling and just waiting for the large explosion to blow up the trees. I've always kind of imagined that the camera wouldn't have panned if the shot had been planned from the start to open the movie. Coppola thought that the footage looked interesting and unusual, and then he went through a bin of music and said, "Wouldn't it be funny if we took a song called The End and put it at the beginning of a movie?" Coppola said that if he hadn't been there on that particular Saturday, the movie wouldn't have begun this way.
Terminate with extreme prejudice. Are you an assassin or a soldier?
John Milius's first draft, dated December 5th, 1969, begins with an author's note telling a story of newly enlisted soldiers waiting to leave San Francisco for Vietnam. The line of new paratroopers are approached by a couple of hippies handing out anti-war pamphlets, and one of the soldiers takes off his helmet and bashes one of the hippies. A sergeant yells, "Which one of you bastards hit this boy?" And the entire company responds in unison, "I did, sir." After which, another hippie remarks, "Just think of what they'll be like when they come back." Milius's screenplay then begins with the narrator reading an army memorandum, and what follows would have been this familiar image. The description reads, "It is very early in the dawn. Blue light filters through the jungle and across the foul swamp. A vague mist clings to the trees. The sound of crickets and jungle animals is playing undisturbed. Tilt down into tepid water. Suddenly but quietly a helmet emerges, and the water pours off, revealing a set of beady eyes just above the water. Printed on the helmet, clearly visible in the dim light, are the words, written in a psychedelic hand. The head emerges, revealing that the tough-looking soldier beneath has exceptionally long hair and beard. He has no shirt on, only bandoliers of ammunition. His body is painted in an odd camouflage pattern." A draft of Milius's screenplay, rewritten by Coppola, dated December 3rd, 1975, cuts the memorandum and has the movie open directly with this iconic shot. This shot was ultimately reincorporated into the climax of the film. That said, it seems that shortly before the inspiration to start the film with the napalm explosion, Coppola's idea was to open with a black screen, and slowly the sounds of the jungle would come out of the darkness, quote, "before any images are seen on the screen." Imagine an overture of insects. The idea was to bookend the film with these sounds over black, opening and ending the film. In the final film, the Doors song sort of bookends the movie as it opens with The End and climaxes with The End. Something a little bit more like the opening in the final film appears in a Coppola rewrite from June 29, 1976, where he describes the opening as, quote, "a simple image of trees, coconut trees being viewed through the veil of time. Occasionally, colored smoke wafts through the frame. We hear music suggestive of 1968, psychedelic. Perhaps the Moody Blues' Nights in White Satin, or the Doors' The End. Willard is seen asleep in Saigon after making love to a whore." So it seems like Coppola already had a vague idea of what this would be like when he stumbled upon the footage in the barrels. Apocalypse Now has more of a connection to the Doors than just the song. Doors frontman Jim Morrison and keyboardist Raymond Zarek met at UCLA Film School while Coppola was attending. Morrison said, "The good thing about film is that there aren't any experts. There's no authority on film. Any one person can assimilate and contain the whole history of film in himself, which you can't do in other arts. There are no experts, so theoretically any student knows almost as much as any professor." By the way, some of their teachers during this time included Stanley Kramer, Jean Renoir, and Joseph von Sternberg. Morrison was particularly influenced by Joseph von Sternberg and German Expressionism, and this influence would carry over to the Doors. Morrison made a very avant-garde student film with tons of bizarre imagery, including Morrison smoking a joint and winking at the camera while an atomic bomb explodes.
Have you ever seen God? Mandela. A symmetrical angel.
Apparently, it was enough for some of the faculty members to call it the worst student film ever, which if you've seen many student films is kind of impressive.
Hey Morrison, fuck him, man. It's great. It's non-linear, it's poetry, it's everything good art stands for.
After the negative feedback, Morrison and Manzarek and another friend named John Densmore decided to start the Doors.
I quit.
And the connection doesn't end with UCLA. Jim Morrison's father, George Stephen Morrison, a former World War II fighter pilot, served as an admiral, quote, in command of the carrier division during its pivotal role in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Wikipedia describes the Gulf of Tonkin incident as, quote, an international confrontation that led to the United States engaging more directly in the Vietnam War. Admiral Morrison would go on to be in charge of all U.S. operations in Vietnam after following President Lyndon Johnson's orders to, quote, give me my damn war. Originally, the entire soundtrack was going to be songs by The Doors. Editor Walter Murch said, we tried many songs, but anything we put on the film seemed to be so apt that it was wrong. It hit the nail so firmly on the head that it seemed sophomoric. There was no connection other than a very deep bond between the psyche of Jim Morrison and the psyche of this film. Murch also saw the opening image of the exploding tree line as, quote, emblematic of the whole Vietnamese experience. If I had to guess what he means by this, I would probably say it's something similar to these images in Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket. The North Vietnamese making small, bold strikes, and the US unloading massive amounts of expensive bombs and ammunition, and not necessarily hitting anything.
You know, one time we had a hail bomb for 12 hours. When it was all over, I walked up. We didn't find one of them, not one stinking big body.
Once the decision was made to use the Doors song in the beginning, editor Walter Murch created an avant-garde sequence of our protagonist Willard thinking about the jungle. Coppola wanted to show what was inside Willard before the story begins, and here we see what's inside his mind. Soon, we'll get a glimpse into his soul. Like the opening shot, the beautiful connection of the helicopter to the ceiling fan was also not planned. Coppola had gotten a shot of Willard on his back, so naturally he got a shot of what Willard would be looking at, the ceiling fan. But Murch's idea to combine it with the sounds of the helicopter blades really shows us how much the jungle is a part of Willard, and it's done in a purely cinematic way. Murch said, I remember vividly the moment when I made the connection between the sound of the helicopter rotors and the visual of the fan. Willard was filmed upside down like that originally. The shot of the Buddha at the right of the frame was part of the idea of forecasting the end at the beginning. Here we actually see part of the end of the film with Willard about to kill Colonel Kurtz, but we don't know it. It just appears as a surreal look into Willard's primal psyche. Sound re-recording mixer Richard Beggs put the track of the Doors song over the opening, but when Murch requested the track from the record label, they accidentally sent the master tracks, so the mix in the movie sounds different than the mix on the album. One thing that was changed was part of Morrison's vocals repeating fuck over and over as part of a reference to the story of Oedipus, where, he accidentally kills his father and marries his mother. He seemed pretty upset about it. I mean, he gouged his own eyes out.
Hey, Josephus! Hey, motherfucker!
Anyway, Morrison's vocals in that part were essentially buried on the track. Beggs said, they sent me the 4-track, a direct copy of the original master they had made for the song, and in that version, Morrison kept saying, yeah! Yeah! But it was never in the album, so I incorporated it into the picture. It was like finding some buried treasure. That said, screenwriter John Milius had always wanted the movie to open with the Doors' Light My Fire, which he considered to be better than the end. In this episode's companion PDF, I go into more detail about Jim Morrison and the Doors' connection to Apocalypse Now. You can get it for just $1, and it really helps the channel out.
The man's enlarged my mind.
There were actually several very different openings that had been written into the various script rewrites. The first opening that was written depicts a Montagnard attack on the Viet Cong, followed by the introduction of Willard on a luxury cabin cruiser in Marina del Rey. Here, Willard is a bodyguard for the head of a large American corporation. He thinks about Vietnam and tells a woman that Los Angeles was once one of the dark places of the earth. And this opens up a dialogue between the two where the woman says, "You're gonna tell me about the horrors of war?" And Willard replies, "Would you really listen if I told you? I mean, about the real horror?" Willard telling his story would be a framing device similar to the one in Heart of Darkness. The novella has its protagonist telling his story to fellow sailors aboard an ivory trading company's steamboat. Another draft of the Apocalypse Now script, from January 1976, opens with the military finding Willard sharing war stories at a bar in Da Nang.
Go fuck yourself.
Milius's versions of the screenplay always seem to put Kurtz at the beginning of the film, and it is here where we can see Milius's idea of what Kurtz and his army are like. First, an ambush of Viet Cong soldiers by Kurtz's army shows Americans who have embraced the jungle and become a part of it. Milius' screenplay reads, "Our view turns as the men around us are thrown and torn, screaming and scattering into the jungle. More Americans appear, unexplainably, out of the growth. It is now that we fully see the bizarre manner in which they are dressed. Some wear helmets. Others wear strange hats made from feathers and parts of animals. Some of them have long, savage-looking hair. Others crew-cut or completely shaved. They wear bandoliers, flak jackets, shorts, and little else. They wear Montagnard sandals or no shoes at all, and their bodies and faces are painted in bizarre camouflage patterns. They appear one with the jungle and mist, firing into us as they move." Shortly after this, the soldier whose head had slowly peeked out from the water now emerges, dripping with mud and firing a machine gun. Kurtz is soon shown as a John Wayne type, with a description reading, "He wears a green beret, and he has close cropped hair and a tough jutting jaw." It's easy to see the connection to John Wayne when you look at Wayne's 1968 anti-communist Vietnam movie, The Green Berets. Wayne is depicted as the ultimate American, stomping out communism. In the margins of Milius' draft, Coppola writes, "What am I saying about him?" Milius' scene continues. The massive stone gate, the patrol passes under it in triumph. Men displaying scalps hanging from their M16s. They hold up captured AK-47s, dope, rice, and other booty. Wild-looking Montagnards cheer and cackle with delight. The colonel turns and crosses his arms, standing majestically. Coppola writes, "Again, this must not appear funny, but it's as though we have come upon a view of something unlike anything we have seen before." Eventually, these openings were scrapped in favor of something simpler. Coppola said, "Marty's character was coming across too bland. I tried to break through it. I always look for other levels, hidden levels in the actor's personality, and in the personality of the character he plays. I conceived this all night drunk. See another side of the guy." The narration, which we'll talk about more in another video, orients us. He has divorced his wife. He can't stop thinking about getting back to the jungle. He's only been back in the civilized world for a week. It's obvious that he has some kind of PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, which had a devastating effect on many veterans of war. I think perhaps the most striking moment is when he says,
"Every minute I stay in this room, I get weaker. And every minute Charlie squats in the bush, he gets stronger."
Charlie is referring to Victor Charlie, part of the NATO phonetic alphabet, Victor for V and Charlie for C, VC, which stands for Viet Cong. What Willard says here is sort of similar to that motivational saying that the people you're competing against in business, art, in trade, or whatever, they're hustling harder than you and they aren't taking breaks. But in this case, the subtext is a little stronger in that the Viet Cong have more at stake, and the jungle is part of their home. Willard has to keep his edge, not just to fight the Viet Cong, but to fight his own demons. What's interesting is that they would provoke a drunk Martin Sheen on his 36th birthday to wrestle with his own demons, on camera. This would result in an injury to Sheen's hand, as well as a scene that blurs fiction and reality, where a character and an actor bare their soul for the audience at the same time. This episode's companion PDF features some more detailed information on Jim Morrison at UCLA, some interesting quotes by Walter Murch and Coppola on the use of the Doors music in the film, as well as a playlist of music that Coppola noted or wrote into the script but didn't end up using. Download it now for just $1 and it really helps out the channel. And if you support me on Patreon at the $5 level, you'll get access to all of the companion PDFs I make for this series. Thanks for watching.